So yeah, little video interview with him. And now we have Randy Hughes going to be coming up here. Before he comes up, does anybody have any questions for me on anything that I've talked about? 30 days, they're all free. So anytime you want to get back to me, you know, you got the information there. I want to give Randy Hughes a big applause for showing up here. Randy is spending a little bit more time in California than he has in the past, but he's actually known as Mr. Land Trust, is a full-time real estate investor who bought his first rental house in 1969. Man, I was just barely out of high school. After investing for 10 years, Randy decided to learn more about how to protect his investment and not be a target for lawsuits. Now Randy has used land trust in his business for over 35 years and says he would not own real estate in his own personal name. We welcome Randy. We welcome America's #1 expert on the use of land trust for real estate investors, Randy Hughes. Thank you, Randy. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
And I'm going to help you get over here.
Would you mind sitting
Got
there?
it. Yeah.
So it's a great day to be in California, isn't it? Especially when you compare it to Chicago right now.
Ooh, I bet it's cold.
It's cold and snowy and icy. And you guys really just don't know how good you have it here. You know, it's just, you get so accustomed to it, don't you?
We're freezing right now.
Yeah. It is really cold. Are any of you right now using a title holding trust when you're buying real estate? Okay, good. Nobody is. So we're going to all learn.
Is that what you wanted?
No.
Okay.
No, could you start from the beginning?
Sure.
please?
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
My PowerPoint.
Thank you.
Okay. Got you.
We're going to talk today about the benefits and the reasons why you should be taking title to your real estate investments in a trust, not in your own name. After being in this business, I support myself in the house business, not in the selling land trust business, but I'm a house guy. Been a house guy all my life. And after being in the business for over 4 decades, you have some experiences that people who maybe are just the first 5 or 10 years in don't know about and don't realize can take them down, can destroy all your hard-earned wealth in one fell swoop. And I'm going to give you some real-life examples how these exposures have happened to me and happened to many of my students, and hopefully convince you by the end of my presentation to not own real estate in your name. There are just no reasons to. There are no benefits. There are only negatives, no positives, because everything you get by owning real estate in your name, you also get if it's in a trust and you're the beneficiary, let's say. Does anybody in here have a living trust? Okay, many of you do. Living trusts are what I call the way you control beyond the grave. You put in there what you want done with your assets when you're gone. They are worthless when you're alive. They have no privacy, no asset protection. So I don't suggest that you fund them while you're alive, but I think you set up a structure, and I'll show you one here in a few minutes, how everything that you own will funnel down into a living trust the moment you die. Because the moment you die, living trusts become irrevocable. So they're really, really strong asset protection devices when you die. That's the bad news. You got to die to get the best benefit out of it. But it might be worth it, you know. We're going to talk about a land trust, but don't let the word land throw you off. Any kind of real estate, and I'll give you a list here of all the type of real estate you can put in a trust, but it's typically called a land trust. We're going to talk about a land trust, a title holding trust today. And a land trust is a type of living trust, but it's exclusive to real estate. So you can't put personal property, your jewelry, your coin collection, your china collection, you can't put that in a land trust. You put that into a regular living trust. What you put into a land trust are real estate assets. This hotel, for example, could be. Thank you.
Okay. Good.
The hotel could be in a trust, a single-family house, an apartment building, any type of real estate. Oh, incidentally, let me go back to that. I get asked pretty much the same questions wherever I go, and I speak all over the United States about trusts. And so I put together a booklet where there are over 50 reasons to use a trust. And if you'd like a free copy of that, text that number, the word reasons, and you'll get a free copy. Okay? If you don't want to text that number, I'll pass around a sign-up sheet, and you can give me your email address and name.
Oh, okay.
Just write legibly, please, so I can send that to you later, and I'll send that book to you for free. Okay. Privacy is the cornerstone of asset protection. Just by not owning this stuff in your name and not being in the public records will solve a whole lot of problems and keep you out of a whole lot of trouble. Just that one thing, just to stay out of the county courthouse records. Because when you buy a lot of real estate and you deed that in your name, that's all public information. Can't we look that up? Yeah? So here's how it goes. I run over Cecilia.
Yeah.
I run over Cecilia's dog, and she goes to her attorney and says, I want to sue Randy Hughes for $1 million. He ran over my dog. Cecilia's attorney says, what's that guy's name? Randy Hughes. And he types my name into his computer. And now if the printer starts printing a page or two of legal descriptions of properties that are in my name, he's going to turn to Cecilia and say, hey, we got a pretty good case here. But if he types in my name and the printer doesn't budge, he says, well, Cecilia, I don't know if we got such a good case here. I'll tell you what, I'll be glad to sue Randy. All I need you to do is get your checkbook out and write a check to my escrow account. It's just $10,000 to start. And I'll go after him. And I'll send you a letter once a month telling you how many hours I spent chasing Randy. And we run out of 10,000, I'll ask for another 10. That's exactly how our legal system works. Like it or not, I didn't invent it, that's how it works. So now she has a decision to make. Before she didn't have a decision. It's easy to sue somebody when you're not writing a $10,000 check, isn't it? It's called a contingency fee basis. But now when she's got to get her checkbook out, she might just say, well, I'll get another dog, you know. Could I have a glass of water, please? Excuse me. So you can see by just not having your name in the county records, owning all this real estate, how it can save you a lot of trouble. Make sense? Here's my standard disclaimer, which says I'm not a lawyer and I'm not giving you any legal advice or accounting advice.
That work?
That's pretty wet, yes. All right. A little history on myself. I did start buying houses in 1969, which was a long time ago. Does anybody remember 1969? Two of us. I did graduate from college. My father was an alcoholic, and he got in the car when I was 16 years old and drove away and never came back. And I tell you that because that left us in what's called a negative net worth situation. Anybody in there ever had a negative net worth? Where you owe more than you own? You're starting below zero. So that's how I started out. I didn't start out with Daddy giving me $20 million to get into the real estate business. So maybe happened to our president, right? So the reason why I say that is once you work really, really hard to build up something when you got nothing, you don't want to lose it. The last thing you want to do is go back to nothing. And that's when you start saying, well, maybe I ought to spend a little bit of time learning how to protect these assets instead of just plowing ahead, acquiring them, and not thinking about the long term. And that's where I started studying, how can I hold title to this stuff not in my name? And there are corporations and LLCs and trusts, right? Those are our primaries. I'm not saying you shouldn't use an LLC. I've got many LLCs and a couple of corporations, but I don't hold title to the real estate in those entities. Why? Don't most lawyers tell you to set up an LLC to hold the title to your real estate? Can't I look up who owns an LLC? So that you have no privacy of ownership, do you? And it sounds a whole lot like if you put more than one property into that LLC, you just created a nexus for a lawsuit. Because if you put 10 rental houses in one LLC and you have a problem on one property and a lawsuit ensues, that's going to tie up the entire assets of that LLC. Didn't Grandma and Grandpa teach us you don't put all your eggs in one basket? You don't put all your real estate in one entity, not one land trust either. You put each property into a separate trust so they're all insulated from each other. Now, they may funnel down to your LLC as the beneficiary of those trusts, and I'll show you a diagram here in a minute. But please, please, if you're not convinced at the end of my presentation today to use a trust, then create an LLC for each property. That's your alternative, which is going to be expensive and time-consuming and a lot of paperwork. But if you don't believe me on trust, then don't put a bunch of properties in your LLC or corporation. You're just asking for trouble. That make sense?
Hey, Randy.
Yes, sir.
What do you say, because I know this topic and LLC stuff has been discussed ad nauseum on something like Bigger Pockets, you know? And there are people really kind of unequivocal on either side, you know, that if you're, you know, and then people who seem at least, you know, I've never met them, but, you know, they like 3,000 posts in Bigger Pockets forums or something and said, you know, I own properties in my own name, I've done it for 40 years. If you have good property management, you play, you know, you're not trying to pull one over on your tenants. You don't need all these special, you know, kind of
They've been
setups.
lucky. They've been lucky. It's like going through a minefield, and if you want to play your odds, play your odds. I don't like the odds. Especially when I'm dealing with my entire net worth that I built from nothing over 40 years. I'm not rolling the dice on every transaction on the hopes that I can make it through that minefield. And they may survive. But boy, if they lose, you get to your 60s and you lose everything, that's pretty depressing. Let me give you an example. 35 years ago, I bought a shopping center with a friend of mine in Illinois. And I told him I wanted to put it into a land trust. And he didn't care one way or another. They didn't know, so he said, sure. And in the year 2000, he moved out of my town and moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I became a very successful real estate developer. Made millions of dollars. Until, guess when? Everybody got a year in mind that changed his life? 08, where he started losing millions of dollars. So about 2 years ago, I'm sitting at my computer looking at the liens and judgments filed in my county because I keep track of those. And whose name is on there? My friend. A bank in Florida has filed a $3.2 million lien in my county. He hasn't been there in 15 years. What are they doing? They're shopping for assets. They want to get paid. They obviously aren't getting it from these properties in Florida. So they came back and said, well, he lived there 15 years ago. Maybe he's got something in his name up there. And I sat back and I thought, oh my God, I just dodged a bullet. Because if he and I had been on the deed together, I would have just lost everything because of something he did. You know it's a bad day when you lose everything because you do something stupid, but you want to shoot yourself when somebody else does something stupid and you lose everything. That is a real bad day. All because we held it in a trust. So all these attorneys and counselors that tell you, oh, don't use a land trust, they're worthless. There's a prime example of saving an entire lifetime of effort because of a trust. Because if he and I had been on that deed, that lien from the bank in Florida would have immediately attached to that shopping center and everything was gone. All equity, all cash flow, everything I've worked for 35 years. If that doesn't convince you, nothing's going to. If that one story doesn't convince you, nothing else will convince you to use these trusts. So that's what I would say in response. You know, if you want to play your odds, good luck, but I don't think that's very smart, especially the older you get. When I was younger, I had 5 or 10 houses in my name. You know, you can roll the dice, but you don't want to do that when you get a bit older, because you're trying to build equity and net worth for your retirement, your children and your grandchildren, and college education, a new house, new car. I mean, everything's at stake here. There are some other benefits. It's not all negative news about protecting your assets. There are some actual benefits I'm going to show you where you can make more money in the same deals you're doing using a trust than not using a trust. So that's good news. We do like to combine the trusts with the LLCs. That way we get the privacy and benefits of the land trust and the asset protection benefits of the LLC as the beneficiary of the trust. Now, the beneficiary of a trust owns personal property. The beneficial interest in a land trust is personal property, like the table you're sitting at is personal property. Why is that significant? It's a different law. The laws are different for personal property than they are for real property. And we'll get to some examples of how you can use that to your benefit. So the tool of the smart real estate investor is a trust. And don't let it intimidate you. It's just a few pieces of paper. You have two things really to create a trust. The trust agreement, which is the contract between the beneficiary and the trustee. So let's take an example. Let's say that Cynthia, I can ask her to be my trustee. Anybody can be a trustee. There are no qualifications. You qualify. So Cynthia can be my trustee, and I can be the beneficiary of the trust. She owns full legal and equitable title of the property. What do I own? Beneficial interest, which is personal property. Okay? She owns the property, but she can't do anything with it until I direct her to do so in writing. It's called a letter of direction. It says, Cynthia, sign this mortgage, or sign this deed. Other than that, she just sits there and holds title. Now, some states' laws require the trustee to have some duties in order to make the trust valid. I don't want my trustee to have any duties. I just want her to hold title and sit in the corner. It could be 20 years before I say, wait a minute, Cynthia, come on over here. It's been 20 years. I'm going to sell the property. Here's a letter of direction telling you to sign the deed. We'll hand that deed over to the closing agent, and they'll give us the money. We'll give them the deed. Make sense? Any questions so far? So a trust agreement and a deed and trust. The deed and trust is very much like a warranty deed, but it's got a little extra language in it. We said we got two parties. We got Cynthia and me. She's my trustee, and I'm the beneficiary in this example. Here's that list of what you can put into a trust, a title holding trust. All interests in real estate. Notes, mortgages, options, air rights, mineral rights, anything related to real estate. I had a guy call me, it was last year, and he said, I want to get your home study course and learn how to create my own trust. And I said, well, great, what are you going to do with it? He said, I've got 1,500 oil and gas leases in Kentucky, and I want to put each one in a separate trust because some of them go boom and some of them go bust, and I don't want the bad ones to infect the good ones. Smart. And certainly he couldn't afford to pay an attorney to create 1,500 land trusts. You can imagine what that would cost. So my home study course is $596. He bought it, and he created 1,500 trusts. That's pretty good value. Some people decide, well, I don't want to learn how to do this myself. I'll hire somebody. And if that's what you decide, that's fine. Let me know, and I'll refer you to a couple of people I can refer you to. Probably would refer you to a lawyer friend of mine in San Diego. She's a very good friend of mine. She does trusts all day, every day. That's her full-time business. and she charges $1,650 per trust. So get all you can stand with her. I had lunch about 6 months ago in San Francisco, downtown financial district, with a lawyer, and he was telling me that he was one of the few lawyers in San Francisco that could create a land trust. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. What do you charge?" He said, $5,000 a trust. He said, "You forget, you have Google and Yahoo and all these high-paid people around here. They'll pay anything." So I said, "Well, more power to you if you can get by with it." So you put anything you want real estate-wise into these title holding trusts. Who is using these tools? Who can use them? Who can create them? All these listed here can create a trust. You as an individual can create a trust. If you're in a partnership, it can create a trust. Your LLC, your corporation. See, there's no trust school. There's no licensing. You don't have to be a lawyer to create a trust. All you need is the knowledge and the forms. And once you've got that, you're done for life. You don't have to buy anything else. The whole rest of your life, you'll create these trusts at no cost. They cost nothing to form. Unlike an LLC in California is what, $800? And that's every year, right? Nothing. So you can't tell me, Randy, I don't want to do this, it's too expensive. I won't take that. You can't tell me that. Yes, sir? Hold on just a second. Yes, sir?
No,
Okay.
There's no fee every year on the land trust?
There's no annual fee, no registration fee, no franchise tax like there is with the LLC and the corporation. Yes, ma'am?
Are the forms the same throughout the United States?
Pretty much. There are only 6 states that actually have a land trust statute on the books. In fact, California doesn't have an actual statute, but they're legal here. But you can take my trust agreement, which I provide in here in the forms disc. It's 34 pages long. And there's a paragraph towards the end called governing law. And you put in there what state law you're following. And I live in Illinois. All my investment properties in Illinois. I don't use Illinois land trust. I think there's a great benefit to you to, if you want to get to this point of learning how to do this, and I'll teach you, using another state to form your trust, no matter what state you live in. There's no federal land trust law. It's all state by state. So that means you can form a Florida land trust to hold title to property in California. And your Nevada LLC could be the beneficiary. Oh my God. My head's going to explode. You got 3 different state laws involved in it. What a mess. Imagine what that's going to cost your adversary to try to break through and find out and determine, lots of legal fees. And let me just say, I don't teach you this stuff for you to take advantage of somebody. I'm teaching it so you don't get taken advantage of. That's the point here. Yes, sir?
No, you answered it. I mean, I've got investment properties in my name on the East Coast, and but your point that you don't have to have that trust in that state, even if they're out-of-state properties. You can have your trust in another state.
Right. Yeah.
But then you got to pay for it. Does the beneficiary or the trustee, have to be in a state where you?
Well, it doesn't have to be. And when I teach my students this stuff, I always try to give them my best advice. And the bottom line is you can get by with pretty much anything most of the time. But if you end up in court, I would like to at least to have told you the structure that I think would bode you best in front of a judge. And that is trustee and trust from the same state. I don't want a California judge to look at this case and say, wait, this is a Florida trust, but you got a California trustee. Well, the administration's here in California, so it's my jurisdiction. I want him to say, wait a minute, Florida trust, Florida trustee, we got to follow Florida law here. You need to go to Florida to sue this trust, Mr. Plaintiff. That's exactly what I want him to do. Okay? Because obviously we just upped the ante, didn't we? Now, the brother of the bar in California calls up his brother in Florida and says, hey, we got a fish on the line here. We're going to double dip now. You start researching this stuff in Florida, and I'll research in California. Now you're paying 2 lawyers. You'll run out of money real fast. Why use this form? Well, it's easy to do. Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So let's say that you don't trust a trustee, that could be your friend, your wife, or whatever. Where can I find eventually a trustee that's not a private person, but it's an entity or something like that?
A professional trustee?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first off, this is my course guide. And in here is a whole chapter on who can be and who should be your trustee. So I give you lots of good ideas. But if bottom line is, if you can't find one, I will provide a professional trustee for you. You'll pay them a couple $100 a year, but they're professional trustees.
Okay.
Some banks have trust departments. I wouldn't use them because they'll give you up in a heartbeat. I like individuals. I really like, and I don't want to get too far into this, we'll run over, but 3 years ago I had an attorney. I have a lot of attorneys that buy my course and learn how to do this so they can charge $1,600 per trust, which I don't blame. Anyway, I had this attorney in Virginia call me, and he said, I love your course, and we got to talking, and I said, well, what do you do for a living? He said, well, I'm a Native American Indian attorney. I travel all over the United States defending Native Americans. And he said, 99% of the time I go into the judge and say, Your Honor, you don't have any jurisdiction here, which really makes him mad. But there's nothing to do about it because they have to go to tribal court to sue the Indians. So he explained to me the concept of sovereignty in this country, which I didn't know. Abraham Lincoln got this through Congress 200-some years ago. There's the feds, there are the Indians, and there's a state. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. So a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, wait a minute, you're telling me that if you were my trustee, I couldn't be sued, my trust couldn't be sued in state court? He said, no, they'd have to go to tribal court. And 99.9% of lawyers in the United States aren't qualified to practice in tribal court. I said, you need to start a trustee business. And he did 3 years ago. And he's now serving as trustee for many of my students.
So this is the guy?
This is the guy. This is the guy. So if you become my student, and you are, I know you've got my course, right? I'll be glad to supply you that information.
Thank you.
He's a great guy. Cutting edge stuff, nobody on planet Earth is doing this stuff but me. So we're going to all learn together so you guys can benefit from it. It's a lot of fun, really. Yes, sir.
I think I saw a movie, Shawshank Redemption,
Uh-huh.
and in that I think this guy gets a trustee, an imaginary trustee of sorts, and then he walks away with all that money.
I was trying to remember. I saw that a long time ago, but I can't remember what the theme was. But there are lots of different kinds of trusts in the world, and that's where a lot of the confusion comes together when you're talking to a lawyer. Because lawyers, number one, they're not taught much of this stuff in law school, and number two, what they are taught is that trusts are trustee-driven. Those of you who raised your hand and said you have a living trust, a living trust is trustee-driven. That means the trustee makes all the decisions on what goes on inside that trust, like stealing your money. A land trust is beneficiary-driven. The beneficiary calls the shots. See the difference? It's a huge difference. Huge difference. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to join the club today of learning how to do this, because they're just simple Word document forms you load up on your computer. You fill in the blanks according to my instruction, and you hit print, and you got a trust. Yes, sir.
One other question about entities. You've mentioned several. What about family offices?
That's for the very wealthy. Those family offices are, and they've got all kinds of fancy structures. I mean, you can really get into this stuff if you want to, and if you got
But
enough
they
money
can't
to
apply.
protect. Pardon me?
They can't. A trust can't apply in that scenario.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to get into this stuff, there's an asset protection trust out in Nevada that is really cool. It's a personal property trust. Now, I said that the beneficiary of a land trust, the beneficial interest is personal property, right? So if you want to bury this deeper, you own the beneficial interest, not in your name, but in your personal property trust.
Right.
And you can Google this, but in Nevada, and I think this, if I remember right, it was November of 1999 when they came out with this. And it's a trust that once you put assets in it and you notify the public that the assets are in there, if it hasn't been sued in 2 years, it's forever barred from being sued. You can't even sue it. You know, so there's some really cool things out there, but you got to start somewhere, and you start with the land trust, which is a basic, simple trust. And if you want to take it further, I actually have, I brought 2 copies of my advanced course. So I wrote this course 17 years ago, the basic course. And a couple of years later, I had a lot of students come back and say, "Dude, this is really good stuff. Would you teach me more?" So I wrote the advanced course. You may never want the advanced course. All you really need to create a trust is the basic course. But if you really get into it and want to discover new asset protection techniques, consider the advanced course too.
Thank you.
So if all my home study course did was prevent you from sitting across the table from these guys once in your life, would it be worth $596? That's what, 2 hours of legal charge.
Yeah, that's less than an hour. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it depends on what area you're in. If you're in New York, it's probably less than an hour. Maybe LA too. All right, let's move forward. So I told you about this lady friend of mine in San Diego who's an attorney. So whenever I'm down there, we get together and we have lunch and we talk trust stuff. And we pulled up to the restaurant, and that top plate was in the car in front of us. I couldn't help but snap a picture. For you, I sue. And this is a plate on an attorney in my town who is a big litigator, very, very, very well known. In fact, he just died 2 weeks ago. I sold him the beneficial interest in a trust that owned the house because he couldn't qualify for a loan. I sold him the beneficial interest in a trust that had a house in it because I didn't trust him. If he was going to bail on me, I didn't want to have to foreclose. I wanted to repossess. Now think about that. If you ever bought a vehicle and you went to the bank and you financed it, they kept the title, didn't they? Till when?
Yeah.
So you paid everything off. All the payments, not, you can't skip one, all the payments. If you skip one, what happens to you? No, they don't foreclose, they repossess. They send the repo man out, put a hook on your car and haul it away, right? That's what we're talking about here. Foreclosure is too expensive. I don't know if you've ever experienced foreclosure, but in my town, it takes about a year and $10,000 in legal fees to get your house back. If you use a trust and sell the beneficial interest in the trust, if the buyer defaults, you repossess, you don't foreclose. Yes, Dan?
So do you give him like a balloon payment or something and say 5 years you need to refinance and put it in your name or some other name?
Yeah, I amortize it over 25 years and have a 3 to 5 year balloon, depending on what we negotiate. Yep.
Could you do that on short term also?
Sure.
You know, maybe if it's a 6 months loan or whatever?
Yeah, yeah. No matter how long the term.
And then how long does it take to repossess the property?
30 days.
Wow.
Because you're really not repossessing. You are taking the beneficial interest back. You're repossessing the beneficial interest. And we do that with 3 notices that ends up terminating the contract within 30 days. And then if they don't move, we kick them out because they're in there on a month-to-month tenancy. Yes, Dan?
So during that period of time, balloon payment, whatever it is, the city comes along, fines you 500 for grass that's 3 inches instead of 2 inches. Are you no longer responsible for that? The people who own it in beneficial interest are responsible?
Yeah, they're responsible for all repairs and maintenance.
Because they own it.
They own it. What's interesting is they own it from a tax standpoint. The IRS says, we don't care if it's in trust. Whoever's a beneficiary of the trust can treat it like they have title.
That's gold.
Yet from a legal standpoint, they don't own it. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, does it? That is really cool. Okay. So it got me to thinking, who's looking out for me? Who's really looking out for me? So I made a list, a real positive list here. Whoops. And I came to the conclusion that nobody is looking out for me but me. I've got an attorney I've worked with for years. He's a great, smart guy. I use him on every real estate transaction, but he does not lay awake at night worrying about my assets, I'm sure of it. So it's up to you, not your spouse, not your children, not your parents, to take the bull by the horn and learn how to do this to protect your assets for the rest of you. It's a dynasty issue, you know. You're either going to pass things on or you're not. So take the bull, get a hold of it, and do this. You'll be glad you did. You will be very glad you did. I get invited to Cancun to speak to a group of real estate investors from all over the United States. There are 30 of us that we go down there for it's called the Real Estate Mastermind. And I'm sitting there having dinner with these folks, and the husband and wife across the table said, "Hey, Randy, we got your course and we use it and just love it." And I said, "Well, why did you buy it?" He said, "We were sitting home one night, on a Friday night, it was 9:30, and the doorbell rang. It was one of our tenants. He said, 'My toilet's plugged up. Come over and unplug it now.' He said, 'Hey, man, it's 9:30 on Friday night. I'll be there tomorrow.' And the tenant said, 'No, you're coming right now.' They had to call the police. A big, big brouhaha. He had to be physically removed from the property. Now, how did he find out where they lived? They had real estate in their name. It's easy. The light bulb went off. That night, they said, 'Hey, guess what? You don't own this stuff in your name. It's too risky.' So they got my course. They took 15 single-family houses out of their name, put them into 15 separate trusts, and they haven't had any problems since. So there are components to what we're talking about. Privacy, asset protection, making more money using a trust, and tenant management. It changes your relationship with your tenants. You are much better off being a property manager than you are an owner. I mean, if I come to you and say, Cynthia, I'm her property manager, here's your rent increase for next year.